It's an application to the defense rests.
Say after testimony.
Yes, Your Honor. We would call the witness Bill Rickleman.
Your Honor, may we approach as to Mr. Rickleman?
You have a seat, Your Honor?
Yes, sir.
Please, the court. Sir, would you state your name, your profession, and briefly outline your professional education and training?
Okay. My name is George Barnard. I'm a physician and psychiatrist. I basically went to undergraduate school at Duke University in Durham, North Carolina. I had my medical school training at the University of North Carolina. I had an internship, 3 years of residency. I had 4 years of payback for the Air Force since I was sponsored by the military. And I did that at the Aerospace Medical Research Lab in Dayton, Ohio. Came to the University of Florida in 1963, and I've been on the faculty there ever since.
Your Honor, subject to Mr. Tanner eliciting whatever background facts he deems important. I know Dr. Bernard very well, and we would stipulate to his qualifications.
Thank you. Dr. Barnard, could you tell us, please, what your medical specialty is?
My medical specialty is forensic psychiatry. This is a subspecialty of psychiatry, and basically it's the interface of psychiatry and the law.
Your Honor, we tender Dr. Barnard as a forensic psychiatrist.
You may proceed.
Could you please tell the jury the difference in training between yourself and a psychologist?
The person who is going into psychiatry essentially has had undergraduate training similar to the psychologist, but then it begins to be different with the psychiatrist taking 4 years of medical training, year of internship, and then 3 years of residency, whereas the psychologist, after the undergraduate degree, has taken 3 or 4 years of graduate training in the specialty of psychology. The psychologist works toward a degree of PhD, and the psychiatrist is an MD. There's a lot of difference in their training during the years of specialization, in that the psychiatrist gets more emphasis, I think, in terms of the biological medical aspects, and the psychologist will get more in terms of doing specialized psychological testing.
Can a psychologist prescribe medicine under current law in the state of Florida?
No.
But a psychiatrist such as yourself can and does prescribe medicine?
Yes.
Did you have occasion to examine, pursuant to court order, Aileen Wuornos, assistant courtroom today?
Yes, I did.
Is this the lady that you examined?
Yes.
Your Honor, may the record reflect identification. Thank you. Sir, could you tell the jury, please, when it was that you conducted the examination and where?
Okay. Basically, I saw Ms. Wuornos in the Division of Forensic Psychiatry in Gainesville on January the 9th of this year. And it took place from a little before 9 until about 5 a.m.
Was there anything at the outset of the examination that was disruptive or out of the ordinary?
She was somewhat agitated over what had taken place on the trip over that she was concerned about.
What were her complaints?
She was essentially...
Objection as to relevancy.
Overruled.
She was basically saying that the officers had made some sexual remarks to her, and that she considered it, I think, to be a form of inappropriate remarks.
Was there some threat by her, to your knowledge, to save the officers who tried to rape her or had raped her?
According to the form of the question.
Overruled.
This was not from her, but from the officer who was with her, said that in the sally port prior to coming over, she had made such a remark.
And was she offered a rape kit examination to detect if someone had intercourse with her?
Yes.
She declined the rape kit examination.
Yes.
Based upon your examination, if you will, just briefly tell the jury what you did. I'm not going to ask you to go through her history all over again. That's been gone through, I think, 3 times already. So just basically tell the jury how you prepared yourself and how you were able to reach a conclusion if you were.
Essentially, with the defendant, I inquired about her understanding of the legal charges against her, her account of the alleged crime, specifically what happened on that day, and what took place subsequent to that time. I inquired about any prior arrests she may have had, went into her past history, determining about her family of origin, how she got along with different family members, her educational record, employment history, military history, marital history, medical, psychiatric, substance abuse history, did a mental status examination to carry out certain kinds of things to determine if she was oriented, how her memory was functioning, and so forth. In addition to that, I had reviewed extensive materials that had been provided by the Office of the State Attorney and Office of the Defense Attorney.
And were you able to reach a conclusion or opinion based upon reasonable medical probability as to her mental condition as it relates to the legal definition of sanity and her ability to conform to law?
Yes.
Did you tell the jury what that conclusion was?
Basically, it was my opinion that at the time of the crime, she was legally sane, meaning that there was no mental disorder or defect that prevented her from knowing the nature and quality of her acts or the wrongfulness of them.
And would that opinion indicate that she is legally responsible for her acts?
Yes.
If the doctor knows the legal definition.
You can ask the old officer.
Yes, Judge.
You had previously had contact with this woman, had you not?
Yes, sir, I had.
And could you tell the jury about that and what the purpose of that previous contact was and what the results of the previous contact?
First time I saw her was September the 19th, 1981. At that time, I was appointed by the court to perform a psychiatric evaluation, essentially to determine if she was competent to stand trial and if she was legally sane at the time of the alleged crime. In my opinion, she was competent at that time, as well as sane at the time of the alleged crime.
No further questions, Your Honor. Thank you. Thank you, Doc.
Any inquire?
How are you, Dr. Bernard?
Fine.
A psychologist is a qualified mental health professional in the area. Is that
Yes.
correct? In fact, you know Dr. McMahon. Any questions about her qualifications?
No,
Have you worked with her in the past?
I haven't.
Have you have you talked to her about the results of her testing in this case?
Yeah, I did.
Have you relied on the results of testing that she has provided in this case and others
Yes.
in formulating an opinion?
Yes.
Psychiatrists are not licensed to provide psychological and neuropsychological testing, is that correct? In general, as a general matter.
as a general rule.
And when a psychiatrist needs the benefit of neuropsychological or psychological testing, they would refer someone to a psychologist.
Again, it's a general rule.
As a general rule.
Yeah.
It's sort of both are mental health practitioners and both come, as you indicated, from a different perspective, but towards the same area, towards mental health.
Right.
You were at, by the way, did you have any questions about Dr. McMahon's diagnosis in this case?
I agreed with her diagnosis, but I had another one also that went with.
Okay, let's talk about the one you agreed with her on. You agreed with Dr. McMahon that Lee Wuornos suffers from a borderline personality disorder, is that correct?
Right.
And in reaching that conclusion, you agreed with Dr. McMahon based on your knowledge of Ms. Wuornos' background, her history, who she is, and what the testing reflected, all of the facts that you had.
Yes.
And you indicated that you received a stack of material from both the defense and the prosecution in this case.
Right.
A borderline personality disorder is an identity. Part of what that is an identity disturbance. Is that correct?
Yes.
And you saw evidence of that in Ms. Wuornos' case.
Yes.
In Ms. Wuornos' case, did you also see an identity disturbance that is pervasive in her history?
Yes.
You also saw affective instability in her case, did you not?
Right.
What is that? What is affective instability?
Basically, it means they have difficulty controlling their emotions, and that they may go from one kind of feeling or affect rapidly to another.
In fact, she is impulsive. You saw that during your review of records and your interaction with her.
Yes.
And did you reach an opinion as to whether she has deficiencies in judgment?
She did.
Did you reach an opinion as to whether she has deficiencies in insight?
She does.
Did you reach an opinion as to whether her history, her familial, developmental, environmental background is consistent with that of people who suffer from borderline personality disorders?
I don't think that you can necessarily say that there's one kind of background, but it's not inconsistent.
Did you perceive evidence in dealing with her of a history of involving suicidal gestures?
Yes.
And in dealing with her, did you observe problems in affect?
Problems in affect, meaning her ability to handle anger too well?
Yeah, control of her mood.
Yes.
One of the criteria which the DSM-3R relates to, speaks to when dealing with a borderline personality disorder is a frantic effort to avoid real or imagined abandonment. Is that something that's consistent with people who suffer from that disorder?
It's found in many of them. It's not necessarily always there, but it's a frequent kind of dynamic that's found.
And the opinion that you reached that Ms. Wuornos suffers from a borderline personality disorder was reached to a reasonable degree of psychiatric certainty, was it not?
Yes.
You didn't simply say, well, Betty McMahon said it, so I agree. That is your independent opinion.
Yes.
In addition, did you consider the testing provided by Dr. McMahon, and I think it was Dr. Berdini, as to organicity and the issue of cerebral or cortical impairment in Ms. Wuornos'
Yes.
case? Did you, during your evaluation, find any reason to disagree with that?
No.
And she did show some impairments.
Some mild, minimal impairment, yes.
Some mild what?
Or minimal impairment.
You spoke a little bit on direct examination of Ms. Wuornos' military history, or the area of military history. Did she make it to the military?
No.
Why not?
She said she failed some of the tests.
The prior case that Mr. Tanner spoke to you about, the prior robbery involving Ms. Wuornos, you prepared a report in that case.
Yes.
And in that report, you included a discussion regarding your evaluation.
Yes.
You said in your report, she and her boyfriend had had an argument the day before the alleged crime, and on the day of the alleged crime, she woke up and still felt angry at him and felt he might be like other guys and would take advantage of her. Is that consistent with what you said? Is that what you said in the report?
Basically, yes.
You also said that she bought a 6-pack of beer. She rode around thinking that she might shoot herself. Is that one of the suicide attempts that we were talking about, or suicidal thoughts that we were speaking about?
That was not one of the actual attempts. She had some suicidal thoughts in it, but she did not make an overt behavioral attempt.
Okay, there was another time that you're aware of where she made an actual attempt.
Yes.
And that's when she shot herself in the stomach.
Yes.
In addition, in the report, you indicated she continued, but then she had thought of what she would do if she continued to drink and ride around. She had thoughts of calling her boyfriend, but then had the thought of what he would do if she robbed a store. She thought if he got her out, it would prove that he loved her, whereas if he did not, it would prove that he did not love her, and she would kill herself then. She said she did not think of a prison term because she was too drunk at the time, and all she cared about was finding out if her boyfriend loved her. You prepared this report in 1981,
Right.
did you not, at the time of the prior evaluation? And this was the report regarding your opinions as to the other offense,
Right.
not a recent report regarding that offense.
Right.
You indicated in the report you also had a section as to her history. And the section as to her history that you included in that report was back then, before anybody heard of Mr. Mallory. Is that correct?
Yes.
You wrote all this in 81. And in 81, you indicated that she got along with her adopted mother, but did not like her adopted father, who she thought as being cruel, and sometimes when he was drunk, he hit her with a belt. Do you recall that?
Yes.
That was back in 1981.
Right.
Ms. Wuornos told you these same things in the current evaluation.
Right.
And what she told you about her family history is consistent now as it was when you saw her in 1981. As to her views of her mother and father and grandmother and grandfather, I guess.
Basically, right.
You also indicated in the report, you made reference to her shooting herself in the abdomen and being put in the Halifax hospital. She said she had been raped and beaten up to 10 or 12 times as she hitchhiked about the country and was unconscious once for about 10 minutes after she fell while drunk. And that was also in 1981, before anybody heard of Mr. Mallory.
Right.
She has made 6 suicide attempts between ages, I can't read the first one, can you?
14 and 22.
14 and 22, but then went on to say that all of these were not attempts to take her life. She began the use of alcohol at age 12 and used it on a regular basis by age 17. You also indicated that in 1981.
Yes.
You also indicated in that report that she had deficits in recent and remote memory in the 1981 report.
Mild deficits.
Mild deficits. In the 1981 report, you did not provide a diagnosis. You did not write one out.
Right.
Is there anything that you saw when evaluating Ms. Wuornos in 1981, if you could sort of just go back in time with me, which would be inconsistent with the diagnosis of a borderline personality disorder?
No.
So she had it in 1981 when you saw her.
If I'm saying she had it now, she had it in 1981.
Okay. You talked in your report about it. Well, Mr. Tanner asked you questions about the question of sanity. The borderline personality disorder and the other impairments that Ms. Wuornos has, those things were with her when she was with Mr. Mallory, were they not?
Right.
You also talked a little bit with Mr. Tanner about the question of competency. Does the question of competency relate to what happened at the time of the offense? Can somebody, in other words, be competent, nevertheless suffer from some impairment at the time of the offense?
Definitely, you can. It's, you do not have to have incompetency because someone has a mental disease or defect.
Okay, competency has to do with whether somebody can stand trial with an attorney there with them and so on and so forth.
Yes.
Thank you, Dr. Wuornos.
Doctor, just one or two other questions. Aileen Wuornos told you that she was drunk or drinking when she committed that robbery back in '81. In fact,
Yes.
and
There was a mixture of alcohol and Librium, I believe she said.
pills and
Yes.
and alcohol. Were you aware of the pre-sentence investigation report that the victim said she didn't appear to be intoxicated at all?
No.
With regard to the other diagnosis, you said that she does have borderline personality disorder.
Yes.
What is the other diagnosis? The competency.
The other diagnosis is an antisocial personality disorder.
And Aileen Wuornos is suffering from an antisocial personality disorder, correct?
Yes.
In layman's terms, what does that mean?
Basically, what it says is that these people have difficulty with moral values. They have trouble controlling their impulses and oftentimes do things that are against society, against the moral values, at times breaking law. That they lack the degree of conscience that many people have who do not have this disorder.
With regard to Aileen Wuornos and the crime of committing Richard Mallory, in your medical opinion, was it committed while she was under the influence of an extreme mental or emotional disturbance?
No.
And with regard to the killing of Richard Mallory by Aileen Wuornos, did she have the capacity to appreciate the criminality of her conduct?
She did.
And did she have the capacity to conform her conduct to the requirements of the law?
She did.
And her personality, borderline personality disorder, and antisocial personality disorder did not impair her to take away those abilities, did it?
Not to an extreme or significant degree.
Okay. No further questions, John. Thank you.
Doctor, just to clarify, in your report, you indicated that Aileen Wuornos did have an emotional and/or mental disturbance at the time of the offense.
She did.
And in your report, you indicated that Aileen Wuornos did have an impaired capacity to conform her conduct to the requirements of the law at the time of the offense.
Yes, she did.
And in your report, you did indicate that Aileen Wuornos at the time of the offense had an impaired capacity to appreciate the criminality of her conduct.
No, not that one.
Not that one?
No.
Okay, the other two you did.
Other two I did, and what I did here was to basically say that he did not reach this to the statutory degree, but I took out the adjectives so that it could be considered for non-statutory mitigating circumstances.
Okay, so you're saying that she had an impairment to conform her conduct to the requirements of law, but not a substantial impairment.
That's right.
So it's a non-statutory mitigating circumstance.
Yeah.
You're saying that she had an emotional or mental disturbance, but not an extreme one.
Right.
So that too is a non-statutory mitigating circumstance.
Right.
In your view, those disturbances and impairments were with her at the time of the offense.
They were.
And they mitigated, in this case,
Non-statutory.
non-statutorily. Is there an interplay between a borderline personality disorder and an antisocial personality disorder? Can
Personality disorders, I think, in general, have a lot of overlaps, but you're not going to find some that are pure, and you're going to find some overlap between different ones. And specifically in these two, there's overlap between them.
if you have a person with a borderline personality disorder and all the tension, the anxiety, the inability to cope that comes with that disorder, is that something that could affect a person in such a way that they commit antisocial acts? So that they would meet the criteria for an antisocial personality disorder?
You could, but I think that if you look at the longitudinal history of the defendant, what you see is that her behavioral problems in an antisocial way began, during her teenage years and have continued across the time.
And so did her borderline personality
Yes.
disorder. That also something that was
Right.
with her in childhood.
Right.
Under the DSM-3 criteria, the following description is given as to antisocial personality disorder. Frequently, there are signs of personal distress, including complaints of tension, inability to tolerate boredom, depression, and the conviction, often correct, that others are hostile toward them. Is that something that's consistent with people with an antisocial personality disorder?
Not necessarily, but it is not inconsistent with it.
Okay, that's one of the criteria provided as to things to look for in those individuals.
Yes.
As to either of these disorders, a borderline personality disorder or an antisocial personality disorder, it is not something that someone chooses as a child, is it?
No.
So that someone doesn't wake up one morning and say, I want to have this disorder when I grow up.
I don't think that they choose to have the disorder. What they may choose is some of the decisions about what I should do behaviorally, and that this behavior then can escalate or get sufficient kind of reinforcement so that it becomes more and more ingrained so that they don't have to do as much choosing, in that it becomes easier for them to carry out some of the antisocial behaviors.
That's a person who is borderline and has problems may drink, for example, to deal with those problems. That reinforces the behavior, that kind of thing.
Yes.
In terms of either disorder or both, they're both listed in the DSM-3R.
Right.
And this book is a book that pertains to disturbances and disorders.
Right.
There's no category in here, normal.
There's a category of no mental illness.
Okay, there's a category of no mental illness, but the rest of the specific disorders listed are all people who are disturbed.
Right.
Thank you, Doctor.
Nick Barr.
Just ask clarity, Doctor. Aileen Wuornos did not meet either of the statutory mitigators with regard to mental health, did she?
Asked and answered. Objection, Your Honor.
Overruled.
She didn't meet either one of those two, did she?
No.
The only one that your testimony...
Objection to that construction, Your Honor.
Let me finish the question.
No further questions.
Any further?
She had a mental or emotional disturbance at the time of the offense.
Ask and answer.
Yes.
She had an impaired capacity to conform her conduct to the requirements of the law at the time of the offense. She had the cerebral dysfunction that's reflected by the neuropsychological testing at the time of the offense.
Yes.
She had the borderline personality disorder at the time of the offense. She had her history that, and whatever one carries with them based on a dysfunctional family at the time of the offense.
Yes.
She had her history of alcohol abuse at the time of the offense.
Yes.
She had her inability to cope that she's reflected throughout her life at the time of the offense.
Yes.
She had her lack of judgment at the time of the offense.
Yes.
She had her lack of insight at the time of the offense.
Yes.
She had her emotional lability, her emotional problems at the time of the offense.
Yes.
And she had her impulsiveness at the time of the offense. And she had the various deficits she suffers from that are either genetic and/or environmental in nature at the time of the offense.
She did.
And you have testified previously as an expert in criminal proceedings in capital cases.
Yes.
All of these things are non-statutory mitigating factors, is that correct?
Yes.
All 12?
My understanding that the jury can consider the statutory as well as non-statutory circumstances.
And in your view, from a mental health perspective, all of those things mitigate in the sense that they describe the mental state of the person at the time of the offense.
Now, I would object, Your Honor. The doctor doesn't decide what mitigates, the jury decides.
You withdraw the question.
Withdraw the question. Thank you, Dr. Goodwin.
In Dr. Bernard, she had the intent to shoot Richard Mowry to death when she shot him, didn't she?
She did.
No further questions.